On the leafy outskirts of Indianapolis in Westfield, Indiana, stood a property known as Fox Hollow Farm. At first glance, it was another large estate, wooded, calm, private. But hidden beneath that veneer was something far darker, a graveyard of secrets, bone fragments, and unanswered screams. This is the story of Herb Baumeister, a man who ruled an 18-acre domain that would one day yield over 10,000 crushed bone fragments and change the meaning of suburban terror. Herbert Richard Baumeister was born on April 7, 1947 in Indianapolis. The son of a doctor, raised in affluence, educated, ambitious, he married Julie Saiter, and together they had 3 children. On paper, he was a successful businessman. He owned and operated thrift stores under the name Sav Alot. He was a civic face, a family man, a man with tamed respectability. But underneath, a darker urge clawed. By the late 1980s, Baumeister began cultivating 2 lives. One in daylight, boardrooms, businesses, polite social circles. The other at night, adopting the alias Brian Smart, cruising gay bars in Indianapolis seeking young men. No records, no histories, just silhouettes in dark corners. He quietly acquired Fox Hollow Farm in 1988. 18 acres with forested land, creek beds, and hidden gullies. The perfect hunting ground. Between the late 1980s and mid-1990s, Indianapolis and its surrounding counties saw dozens of disappearances. Young men, often with histories tied to nightlife, vanished. Many were gay or suspected gay. Some left bars and were never seen again. Initially, police treated these as separate missing persons cases, but patterns gradually revealed themselves. The consistency of these disappearances, often near the same areas or nights, garnered suspicion. Was one predator responsible for many? Some investigators began to circle Baumeister's name, though no official links were established at the time. In December 1994, the fragile calm shattered. Baumeister's teenage son wandered into the wooded area behind Fox Hollow and found something no child should ever see: a human skull. The teen showed the skull to his mother, Julie. Herb attempted to explain it away, claimed it was an anatomical skeleton belonging to his late father. The explanation sounded calm on the surface, but beneath it trembled fear. Julie quietly prepared to leave. But before she could move fully, the shock spread. Investigators gained a search warrant in 1996. What they found was beyond horror. Burned, crushed, charred bone fragments hidden across the land, shallow pits, tree roots, burial gullies. They recovered over 10,000 individual bone fragments. Skulls, ribs, femurs, cervical vertebrae, crushed pelvises. Many were too destroyed to identify. A handful, only a few dozen, could be matched to missing persons via dental records or incipient DNA. The vast majority remain nameless, faceless, silent. Baumeister knew authorities were closing in. He fled the country, heading to Canada. On July 3, 1996, in a provincial park corridor, he unalived himself with a .357 Magnum. In his note, he spoke of failing his marriage, his business, spoiling the natural beauty of the park, but he never confessed to murder, never acknowledged the bones back home. He died a free man in name only. The bones stayed behind. For years, the case sat in limbo. Evidence lay stored in boxes, bone fragments in sealed bags, waiting. Families of missing men waited longer. The public knew pieces. Newspapers ran stories, documentaries recounted chilling discoveries. But momentum stalled. The missing men stayed missing. The fragments stayed fragments. Then, in 2022, a change. A new Hamilton County coroner took office pledging to reopen neglected cold cases. He brought in Dr. Krista Latham and the University of Indianapolis Human Identification Center. They confronted the enormity: 10,000 fragments. It was a mass forensic puzzle, possibly the largest in US criminal history. The team requested genealogical DNA from families of missing men in Indiana and surrounding states. They called for help. Over the next years, a few names emerged. Alan Livingston, missing since 1993, was identified in late 2023. Manuel Resendez, missing from 1993, identified in early 2024. Jeffrey A. Jones, whose name had lain lost among bones, finally matched. In 2025, Daniel Thomas Halloran became the 10th confirmed victim. Each identification brought relief, pain, connection, but hundreds more fragments remain unmatched. Some are too degraded. Some had no family DNA references. Some belong to men who were never reported missing. Each unnamed fragment is a silent life stolen. What drives a man to hide evil behind suburban normalcy, to cultivate brevity in horror? Baumeister's public story was business, family, community. But his hidden story was predation, secrecy, and betrayal of trust. 2 lives, 2 truths. His self-immolation spared him public trial. His bones sparing nothing else. Fox Hollow Farm now lies in memory and silence. Investigators continue to review, test, appeal, and hope. Every fragment is a person, not a statistic. Every name matched is justice given. The case is not closed, not yet. The soil remembers, the bones whisper, and those left behind wait for memory to be complete. When investigators first stepped onto Fox Hollow Farm, they were unprepared for what they would find. The summer air was thick, the ground damp, and the silence so heavy it almost seemed unnatural. Behind the beautiful home, through a row of dense trees, a small clearing opened, and in that clearing they found the first bone fragments, tiny, white, charred. Investigators thought they might belong to animals, but when they picked one up and turned it under the sunlight, the truth became unmistakable. It was human. More bones followed, hundreds, then thousands, scattered like ash across the ground, mixed with leaves and soil. Some were crushed, others burned, and many broken into such small pieces that even experts struggled to identify what part of the body they once belonged to. The backyard that had hosted barbecues and family gatherings had become a graveyard. Neighbors couldn't believe it. The Baumeisters had been the picture of suburban respectability, a family with money, a nice home, and polite smiles. But behind closed doors, Herb's marriage had already started to crumble. Julie had noticed changes in her husband. He became distant, paranoid, and irritable. He spent long nights away from home, disappearing without explanation. He avoided intimacy, avoided questions, avoided reality. When the skull was found by their teenage son, Julie's trust finally shattered. She quietly took the children and moved out. Soon after, she approached the police, and the real nightmare began to unfold. As detectives began piecing together the evidence, they realized that the killings may have started as early as the late 1980s. Each disappearance followed a pattern. A young man in his 20s, last seen at an Indianapolis gay bar, often near closing time. A man matching the description of Brian Smart, tall, polite, slightly awkward, with piercing eyes, would offer a drink or a private party at a nearby house. The men would leave with him and never return. The alias, Brian Smart, became a ghost story in Indianapolis nightlife. Bartenders whispered about him. Survivors spoke of a man who liked to play dangerous breath control games, choking partners until they nearly passed out, and laughing about it afterward. One man even managed to escape. He told detectives about a night in which Brian became aggressive during one of these games. The survivor fled the house and later led police back to where he thought it happened, but without a warrant, they couldn't enter the property. It wasn't until years later that he would realize the house was Fox Hollow Farm. By the time authorities finally entered, the evidence of evil was overwhelming. They found the remains of at least a dozen individuals in the woods and more bones inside the garage, where investigators believe Herb may have burned and crushed his victims to destroy evidence. His methods were disturbingly organized. He seemed to know exactly how to clean, where to burn, and how to scatter remains so that no full skeleton could ever be recovered. It was methodical, almost clinical, as if he treated human lives like waste to be disposed of. Forensic experts describe the site as one of the largest crime scenes in US history, rivaling the scale of mass disasters. The fragments covered nearly every inch of soil behind the mansion. Some were no bigger than pebbles. Herb's descent into darkness didn't happen overnight. As a child, he'd shown strange behaviors, fascination with dead animals, dark humor, and unpredictable mood swings. Teachers described him as intelligent, but socially disconnected. In high school, classmates avoided him. He once placed a dead crow on a teacher's desk as a joke. As he grew older, his odd behavior turned into isolation. Though he married and had children, those closest to him would later say he seemed detached from reality, almost like he was performing the role of a husband rather than living it. Psychologists who later studied his case suggested that Baumeister may have suffered from undiagnosed schizophrenia or severe personality disorders, but his charm and intelligence helped him mask it. In public, he was eccentric but harmless. In private, he was unraveling. After his business began to fail in the early 1990s, Herb's obsession with control and dominance intensified. He spent more time at bars, more nights away, and more time living under his second name, Brian Smart. The nightclubs of Indianapolis became his hunting grounds. He targeted men who were young, trusting, and often intoxicated. The pattern was simple. He offered friendship, safety, and luxury, then delivered terror. When authorities finally confronted him with the growing list of evidence, Herb denied everything. He refused to let them search his property, calling it a personal invasion. Even when his wife gave consent after moving out, Herb fled. His escape to Canada was not dramatic. He drove alone, crossing the border unnoticed. For days he camped near a lake in Ontario. He left behind his car, a few personal items, and a note. In that note, he blamed his failing marriage, his business troubles, and depression. But not once did he mention the victims, the bones, or the lives he had destroyed. He shot himself in the head under a pine tree. His body was found by a cyclist a few days later. With his death, the truth died with him. There would be no confessions, no trial, no chance for the families to face the man who had stolen their sons. Years later, Fox Hollow Farm changed ownership, but the ghosts remained. The new owners reported strange occurrences, saw cold spots, footsteps, and disembodied voices. Paranormal investigators visited the property, claiming to capture EVP recordings of whispers and cries. Some even said they saw figures walking through the woods at night, only to vanish among the trees. But beyond ghost stories, the real horror is forensic. Investigators still return to the site occasionally. Soil samples, bone fragments, and newly discovered remains continue to emerge. The largest challenge is identification. Each fragment must be compared against thousands of DNA profiles, a process that can take months or years. Every new identification brings closure to one family, but also reminds the world how many are still missing. Experts estimate that Baumeister may have killed between 25 and 50 men, though the exact number may never be known. What's chilling is not just the scale, but the precision, the patience. He operated for nearly a decade in plain sight, raising a family, running a business, attending church events, and shaking hands with the very people who would one day read about his crimes. It wasn't just murder, it was a performance of sanity. To this day, some investigators believe Herb Baumeister may have also been responsible for other unsolved disappearances along Interstate 70, known as the I-70 Strangler murders. The profile matched: same type of victims, same methods, same region, same time frame. But because Baumeister was never tried and the physical evidence too fragmented, the connection remains speculative. For the families, the pain never faded. Each anniversary of discovery reopens wounds. Each fragment recovered reignites grief. For Indiana, the case became a haunting reminder that evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it wears a smile, a suit, and lives next door. Behind the bones are real stories of lives ended too soon. Young men, sons, friends who vanished. For decades, their families waited. When identities emerged, emotions were raw. Grief, anger, closure mingled. In Westfield, Indiana, a memorial now stands with plaques bearing confirmed names, blank spaces for those still unknown. At a dedication, doves were released, tears were shed, and a community acknowledged the weight of remembrance. Today, Fox Hollow Farm's once quiet land is haunted by silence. But the case is not over. Investigators continue scouring records, testing fragments with newer technology, appealing to families for DNA matches. New media attention has resurfaced public interest. Documentaries, podcasts, renewed journalism have shed light on the shadows. Baumeister may be dead, he may never admit guilt, but the bones endure. And for every fragment that can be named, we restore a piece of a stolen life, we restore memory. That is the work of justice, even decades later. In the end, the horror lies not only in the brutal acts, but in how easily evil can hide behind suburban normality. The soil of Fox Hollow remembers, and until every name is spoken, every victim honored, the silence is not enough.